Oh,
we're in.
what?
We're in.
We're in. Hello, dearies. Welcome to Undersampled Radio, episode 51. It has been a long time since I've said that intro. Mm-hmm. Why so, Matt?
Well, we've had you kept the rate of podcast releases up, so people may not have noticed, but I was away for 2 whole weeks at the beginning of July. Had a very nice trip to sort of southwest Utah and northern Arizona, around the national parks and some of the state parks around there in an RV. My first RV experience with my 3 kids and my wife. It was awesome.
Cool. Did you see some rocks?
Oh my God. I mean, I don't know if you'd call geology a lottery, but if it was a lottery, Utah would have won it, because the geology is ridiculous. You know, you're standing on like Zion National Park, and many of the parks around there have this similar sort of pattern, a similar sort of stack of stratigraphy. You're standing in fossil sand dunes, these beautiful trough cross bedding and amazing colors. It's kind of red and pink and orange and white sandstones, and then they've been carved into these amazing canyons. You know, so the geomorphology is also awesome in the modern sort of side of it. But there's also sort of I don't know. I think they're sort of 100 to 20,000 year old lava flows kind of pouring over everything with little cinder cones every now and again, and it's just crazy. And everything's sort of beautifully weathered into these incredible cliffs and things, so you can see it all. It's right in your face. So just the contrast. I just wonder what if geology had been kind of delayed by, I don't know, 50 or 100 years. I feel like it would be a completely, the science would be rooted in the US. Because right now I think of geology as being historically rooted in the UK and British geology. You know, it's where a lot of the sort of archetypal outcrops and you know, the original thrust fault and stuff like that are there. But you go and visit some of those outcrops, not all of them. The Moyne Thrust is pretty cool. But there's, you know, I remember visiting the Shap Granite as an undergraduate at Durham, and it's literally like a little. You walk into the middle of this muddy field surrounded by sheep in the rain, and there's a tiny outcrop that you could park a Mini on and hide it. Utah's not like that. So you know, there's your geology over there. You could spend a whole career on any one outcrop. It's awesome.
So geology is only one of your interests. Geophysics is also one of your interests. I mention it because we're going to cover only one more bullet point of news this morning, because I apologize to our audience for being late. My computer doesn't like me very much. So what's happening in Houston on the 22nd to the 24th of September, Matt?
So we're doing another hackathon, which I realize might be becoming sort of old news to a lot of our listeners, but yeah, time to get excited all over again. Another Geophysics Hackathon in Houston in September, it's the weekend before SEG, and we haven't found a location for it yet, but we're gonna. Very close, I think, to having a location that we'll probably announce next week. And it's going to be downtown Houston anyway. That's the gist of it. The theme is going to be machine learning again, because you know, we only scratched the surface in Paris, so we're going to have another crack at that one. And yeah, it'd be awesome to see there. And even if you can't come yourself, dear listener, please do help us spread the word, because we've only got a couple of months lead time on this one to actually get. I'm aiming for 10 teams, so 50 people. Please and thank you.
Cool. I'm psyched. It's going to be awesome.
But just very quick footnote, because we'll talk about it again in the future. But since I already mentioned Utah, APG is in Salt Lake City, Utah next spring in May. There's going to be some machine learning geology stuff happening at APG, so start getting excited.
I'm not sure I can handle all this excitement. There's too many events. Why don't you?
Okay, we'll cancel that one.
Why don't you introduce our guest, please?
Yeah, so thank you. And we seem to have him with us. He's muted right now, I see. He's joined us on his phone. Aaron Foyer, is it Foyer or Foyer?
Foyer.
Aaron Foyer from ENERGYminute. ENERGYminute is so far. I know there's a website. I know there's a Twitter account, and I came to Aaron's stuff through a slightly convoluted route, probably after a really cool geothermal session at the CSPG conference, or the Geo conference, the Geo convention in Calgary in May. And I followed some links through the Canadian Geothermal Energy Association, and eventually ended up at ENERGYminute. And I thought, wow, these guys seem really cool. They're trying to promote sort of awareness and policy around energy use in Canada, and maybe beyond that. I'm not sure. We'll find out from Aaron in a minute. And I thought it'd be fun to find out a bit more about these guys and what they're up to. So hi, Aaron, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Whereabouts have we found you today?
Today I am in Calgary. So I just moved back from London, England, where I was working with a renewables company, and decided to come back to Calgary.
Ah, okay, cool. So how long were you in the UK?
For 6 months.
Okay, nice. And are you from Alberta? Is that home for you?
Yeah, born and raised in Calgary.
Okay, awesome. And so, yeah, what's your kind of background? Are you kind of a policy wonk, or are you an engineer, or where are you coming from professionally?
So my original background, I'm a geoscientist. I have degrees in geology and geophysics from the U of C. So I worked for 5 years in the oil and gas industry in Calgary, and then I figured in the downturn was a good time to go get my MBA. So I just got my MBA over in Europe, and then worked for 6 months in the renewable sector, and then decided to come back to Calgary because it's home and it's interesting.
Yeah, right. That's really cool. So, had you had an interest in kind of the business side and that before, or how did you? What made you decide? Apart from this, I guess the downturn, were you thinking, oh, I'll see if I can pick up these skills and see what happens to oil and gas, or more like let's take things in a different direction?
I think I don't have a particularly bright outlook for especially geophysicists in Alberta. And so I think that, part of it was I just wanted to get an additional skill set that would help me hopefully have a slightly longer career.
Yeah.
But no, that's not to say I don't believe in geology or geophysics, because that's where all the magic happens in oil and gas. But yeah, add on additional set of interests.
Yeah, cool. And what kind of renewables were you working on then in London?
So I worked with a fund called Camco, and they do investments into renewable projects in what they call emerging markets, which is really Africa, and so it was mostly mostly wind and solar, and some hydro projects and a few biomass projects. So really the whole spectrum.
Yeah, right. So there, you were doing sort of research, were you, to help them figure out what might make a good investment?
Yeah, so I was doing finance, so writing financial models for them to try to figure out which projects were economically viable.
Cool.
How well constrained are those sort of models in that market?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm just wondering, how much? Uh-oh, did we lose you for a sec there? Oh, we've lost your visuals.
I think we've lost Aaron. So let's cover some more news.
Oh, no, there he is.
Sorry,
there he is.
Yeah, sorry, it was cutting in and out for a second.
Did you catch my question?
I didn't.
Okay, so you said you're working on financial models, for renewables, mostly in the in Africa, and I wondered how well constrained those models are, or if, I mean, presumably there's a lot of uncertainties because a lot of those technologies probably aren't tested at scale yet.
Yeah, it's renewables is really interesting. So coming from oil and gas, where everything is commodity driven, the big uncertainty is really future revenues. Like if the price of oil or gas goes down, that's sort of the big risk for these projects. Where in renewables, oftentimes you'll have the utility company who will guarantee a certain rate of return for a wind project. So they'll say, okay, we're going to guarantee you that you'll get a 10% return, and we'll pay you whatever it takes to meet that return. And so in that sense, there's a lot less risk. The big risk in Africa is, will the utility company actually pay you? Because it's a lot less regulated. It's there's certainly a lot more corruption in the countries. And so the risk is very different. It's a lot more to do with regulation and the physical and, like, I guess, corruption within the companies rather than renewables themselves and the projects.
Yeah, I see. So the sort of stability of the parameters around the project is.
So how much sort of physical science goes into the financial modeling, if any? Or is it all based around corporate risk?
Yeah, not that much. I think if you were to look at geothermal projects, there probably is a fair bit of, that's where you'll have all your geologic risk, like whether or not you're going to hit a hot pocket or how long that can actually be sustained. But with like wind projects and solar projects, I think that engineers typically have a pretty good idea of, like how much is the sun going to shine on a particular part of the world. They have a pretty good idea of how that's going to be. So they have an understanding of like how much electricity a certain area is going to generate.
Yeah,
that's
right.
Interesting. What kind of like historical record do people keep on wind averages and solar radiation? And I mean, is it pretty extensive?
It depends on the country. So prior to any of these climate agreements, I don't think that there was that many because there wasn't really a push for it. But now there's a lot of international communities. So to try to develop these models to have a good understanding of, where's a good place to put a wind farm, or how much solar, they call it solar irradiance, how much solar irradiance does a specific area have? So once you have, like if you have a satellite, you can measure solar irradiance on a whole country, and you do that over the course of 5 years, and then you have a pretty good idea of how much sunshine it's going to get.
Interesting.
Yeah, right.
So you've moved on, and now ENERGYminute is a thing. What is ENERGYminute?
ENERGYminute is it's sort of an answer to a frustration that myself and the other founder, Alexandria Shrake. So we're both kind of frustrated that, specifically when it comes to news and information, it's very divisive. So energy is a very divisive subject in Canada, and it's very difficult to get news that sort of supports both sides. So like if you talk to most Canadians, I think that there's a strong belief that you can have responsible resource development while promoting the advancement of green energies. I think that that's a pretty commonly held belief. But if you look at the like major news sources that people get, oftentimes it's, like we have to stop oil and gas production today, or green energies are not at all the solution. And so ENERGYminute was a way to try to, stick ourselves in the center, say like you can have both, and to look at it from a scientific perspective. So both Alex and I are scientists by background, both in geoscience, and we just wanted to put the facts and the figures in front of people, so then people can think about them themselves and conclusions. Like we're not here to tell people that oil is good and renewables are bad, or vice versa. We just want to put the data in front of people and then let people think about it themselves.
So you're not funded by an oil company?
No, we've been pretty. All of our funding so far has come from private individuals, and we make sure. We've actually had a number of organizations come forward who've been like, "Okay, we'll pay you to put out a video on the carbon tax that comes out against the carbon tax," and we've actually said, like, look, we're not interested in doing that. We don't really want to take a side. We just want to find the data and then put it in front of people and let people come up with their own conclusions.
So I spent all morning watching every one of your videos and looking at every one of your infographics because they're really good. I mean, they're not only are they data heavy and informative, they're also ridiculously pretty and stylistically awesome. How does one do business with ENERGYminute? I mean, it seems to me like you're putting a lot of cool stuff out online, but do you interface with clients individually?
You mean to get funding?
No, I mean, like, is there a service or is there a product offered?
No, for right now, what we simply focus on videos, infographics, and then as we have more money to develop other tools, we're going to have. I don't know if you've checked out our website, but all of our videos and infographics are there right now. But in the future, there will be more interactive maps. So we'll be pulling a lot of the Government of Canada website and the National Energy Board website, both which are just like flush with information, but they're so boring that no one ever goes there, and they're presented in just tables. So we're actually going to take that data and turn it into maps of Canada and see where. So you can be able to click like, okay, I want to see where wind generation is happening in Canada, and you'll be able to see, oh, like there's actually a lot that happens in Alberta and Saskatchewan, or you'll be able to see that there's a lot of hydro production in Quebec, or you'll be able to see where consumes more natural gas. And so it'll just be a way for people to learn more about where energy comes from.
Cool. I like it. And so is the goal to put out one video a month or something? Is there a regular schedule, regular heartbeat to the thing?
We try to have sort of like a theme for the month. So we'll have like a video on nuclear, and then that will be supported by 2 or 3 nuclear infographics for the month.
Cool.
We've actually added a third person to our team, so we're hoping that as we have more people, we'll be able to generate more content.
Yeah. Right on. So go to the website, by the way, is energyminute.ca, and you can go check it out. As Aaron says, all the content is up there right now, and morning you'll spend an hour going through it all. It's awesome. So we have a couple notes in here from both Matt and I about specifics of energy related stuffs, but I think Matt wrote a question here that says, what's missing? So sort of a high level question. What's missing from Canada's energy landscape?
Do you mean in terms of energy sources or legislation, or?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking about everything. I mean, you've already highlighted sort of impartial data sources, if you like, and reasoned debate as a couple of things that are missing from the energy landscape. And I totally agree. I think especially in Alberta, where the debate can be particularly fractious. Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean fractious, maybe the wrong word, but you know what I mean. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested in whether you think there is stuff that's missing from policy and from kind of a research perspective, if the things that Canada is not paying attention to that it maybe should be.
I think a lot of it boils down to education. Like, since Alex and I have started this, we've talked about ENERGYminute with thousands of people. And I think that and on all subjects. And I think the big surprise for us has been some of the, some basic parts of the energy education that are missing, or energy literacy.
Mm-hmm.
So, different sort of energy sources do different things. So oil is sort of the unique one because it generates gasoline and it generates jet fuel and plastics, and most of the other energy sources create electricity. So renewables, for example, create electricity. So there seems to be this rivalry between renewables, and they occupy, in my mind at least, they occupy very different spaces in the energy landscape. And so to me, they're not rivals. Like, you can have both the development of oil and the development of renewables, and they don't really compete for each other. But I think that the biggest surprise we've had is that in the minds of a lot of people, that they do compete for each other, with each other. And so I think that giving people sort of this basic level of, if you were to substitute, what would it substitute with? Or if you were to substitute coal with something, what would it substitute with? And I think that having a better understanding of that will lead to better policy, because people will be able to say, okay, I don't like coal. I think that a good replacement for coal is hydro, or I think that a good replacement for it is renewables. And so I think that just the basic education there, I think we still need to work on that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, just sort of to illustrate, I've cut the two things that come to my mind, when you're talking about that. I guess it's basically an awareness and education gap. Fracking was banned in Nova Scotia by the provincial government for 10 years to get a handle on, what the risks were and so on. And on the face of it, that's a reasonable decision. 10 years is probably too long, I would say, to sort of put a moratorium on a technology just because you don't quite understand it yet. Things tend to move faster than that. But most people in Nova Scotia are opposed to fracking, without obviously knowing a great deal about it. Meanwhile, Nova Scotia generates most of its power from coal, much of which is shipped here from South America, for example, Venezuela, which is crazy, right? And so fracking in that light becomes a horrible decision, because if we have a source of natural gas that's right here, that's clearly a more sensible, to me anyway, a clearly more sensible strategy is to at least start investigating how much of a resource it is, so that you can have a sensible conversation about where your energy is coming from, where you're, in this case, electrical power, how it's being generated. So that's one thing that I always just think, wow, none of that nuance came into the debate as far as I could tell. It was all this totally polarized, fracking is terrible, I don't want flames coming out of my kitchen taps. That was the level of the debate. The other thing, I just noticed a tweet the other day, and of course Twitter's not exactly, well, Twitter is actually a massive source of information for people these days, but anyway, this was from like Business Insider or Forbes or some business oriented but fairly legit outlet, and the headline was something like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like, forget solar and hydrogen fuel cells, the future of energy for transport is batteries. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just like, so even among the reporters that are supposedly sort of serving the communication of this kind of stuff, there's a sort of low level of understanding about electricity and where it comes from. So I think you're doing really awesome work. Are you getting traction and getting invited to events, or are people in Calgary kind of aware of what you're up to and getting you involved?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the biggest surprise has just been how quickly people have latched onto it. The other half of ENERGYminute is Alex, She's what people would call a super networker. So she seems to know everybody in town. I think she was the one who actually led that geothermal
yes
talk.
Yes.
Yeah. So she is definitely a familiar face around Calgary, and so I would say that we've had. There's certain the surprise that to me was I was expecting a bunch of backlash for being pro oil and being pro renewables, and it's been the exact opposite. Is that everyone has been very excited about the prospect of someone who can think of the positives of both sides.
Yeah, and do you I think one of the things that the oil industry has really failed at is some kind of empathy or sympathy with positions that oppose it. Basically, a failure to kind of recognize people's fear of fracking, for example, right? So see why it would be kind of worrying to have massive.
Sorry, that question didn't come through.
Oh, okay. I was just saying, I feel like the industry has let itself down by not recognizing the reasonableness of people's fears around things like fracking. Instead of saying, yeah, I get why having a bunch of fracking trucks running through your neighborhood and seeing all this heavy machinery and stuff would freak people out. Instead, the reaction is, there's nothing to worry about. We've been doing fracking for years. You guys should all just sort of leave us alone, you hippies.
Well, you combat those fears with data, which is exactly what ENERGYminute is doing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, data is part of it, but I think the industry could be more sympathetic and more kind of just recognize that there's, in the face of the uncertainty that exists around it, that some of that space is going to fill with fear, basically. And sure, the fear may be overblown. I'm not going to call it unfounded, because I think you should probably be worried about industrial processes. They do go wrong sometimes. Like, you should ask questions. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, and engineers and scientists don't always know exactly what they're doing. That's just likewise, I would say that green groups need to recognize that industrial risk and say, yeah, there's a transaction we're making where we want to go on vacation and fly goods over from China and have massive container ships going all over the world with our stuff in them. And right now, in order to do that, we need petroleum. The recognition on both sides is completely lacking.
Indeed.
So, yeah.
So that's actually related to my next question, which touches on the sort of balance of sourcing of energy. So we see historical changes in energy sources, and I wonder if ENERGYminute or anyone has enough data to determine what kind of ratio there is between the change in those sources, say from coal to petroleum, whatever, with respect to demand, consumer demand, and legislation. So, for example, in the States, we've made certain legislation in the past which has limited or expedited the production of petroleum in certain regions. And when that happens, obviously production changes overall, shifts towards, say, coal or something. And that's a piecewise shift in the production, but also demand changes continuously. So Aaron, can you touch on do you guys have enough data to make a analysis of demand versus legislative changes in energy production from which sources?
I can't say that that's something that we've looked at so far. Canada just issued we've just started a carbon tax, a countrywide carbon tax. And so it's sort of, I don't think that there's any country out there that has a full-fledged carbon tax out there. So it will be interesting to see how that will have an effect on, like, we do have coal production, and then of course we do have a lot of oil and gas production. So it'll be interesting to see sort of 5 years from now how the carbon tax will have affected industry. It's tough right now. Certainly legislation can have a big effect on where production comes from. Like if you look at Germany right now, they right after Fukushima, there are people really turned against nuclear, and so nationwide they decided to start shutting down all their nuclear facilities, and they needed a power source that could keep up with what nuclear had given them. And even though they're a very green country, the only one that could match sort of the reliability of nuclear was coal. So they started shutting down all their nuclear plants, and they started starting up a bunch of coal plants. And so the net result was that their CO2 started to go up. So it depends on sort of the attitude of the people. You know, if you have people who really support getting out of oil, but if you have people go the other way too.
Yeah, but like you say, when the people are not necessarily that well informed, maybe that's suboptimal. I don't know. Like, I mean, I think the decision in Nova Scotia about fracking was essentially a popular decision. But I think, obviously I work in the oil and gas industry, so it's impossible for someone like me to say this in public, really. But I mean, I think it was a wrong decision. You know, and I think I'm objective, but obviously, you know, it's tricky, isn't it?
It is.
So what's going to happen with energy production in the next 5, 10, 50 years?
I mean, you talk to different people and people have different answers. Certainly with consumption's going to go way up. So it's, regardless of source, the total global energy consumption is supposed to go up by 50% by 2040, which is just a colossal amount of new energy. So certainly we're in like renaissance of, but it's still only supposed to be like 7 to 10% of our total energy use. We'll probably have more coal use, more oil use, more natural gas use. Everything is going to go up, I think, before it starts going down.
Yeah, I mean, especially the state of gas production in North America. I mean, now that we realize there's just a gigantic amount more to that resource than we realized, we can essentially make the price as low as anybody wants it to be. And it's because of that that I think actually a carbon tax is a good thing. I mean, there is no, because without it, you would have, I think, unchecked growth of fossil fuel use. And since apparently North Americans can't bear to pay any more for their gasoline, which is ridiculously cheap, especially in the US. I mean, it's crazy. And people apparently won't tolerate paying a reasonable amount for their airfares and so on. I don't see how else you keep a lid on it, right? Because we could make natural gas practically free in North America for the next 200 years. You know, it's a bit of a hyperbolic statement, but not too far from the truth. That's bad as far as global warming is concerned. I think that's terrible. It also takes the anxiety off the need to find a solution, which I think is a shame. I've always found the lack of funding for nuclear fusion quite a tragedy. You know, I mean,
I agree.
The entire budget of the biggest fusion research project is less than the capital cost of a new natural gas installation in, say, you know, the South China Sea. I mean, we could just solve that. I feel like, you know, we could solve that problem as an engineering problem that we can solve with money and time, and the interest just isn't there.
Yeah, I think I really love nuclear as a source. I think that it's vilified in a lot of ways, but I think that it's a little bit unwarranted. Like it's such a green energy. I really think that it should play a bigger part in our energy future.
What about Fukushima though? Is there a warning there, do you think? What are the lessons learned from that accident?
Yeah, if you look at nuclear on if you look at all energy sources on a death per kilowatt basis, like how many deaths result from electricity, the nuclear, including Fukushima and Chernobyl, is still by far the lowest. And I think that what's happened is that, I mean, certainly they're terrible and it's really expensive to clean up. But on an aggregate, like if all of the deaths from windmills happened from 20 years, all happened in a single event, I think that people would be a lot more terrified of windmills. But because they're sort of spread out geographically and over time, that I think people are fine with it. Whereas because there's sort of one major event that happens in nuclear every 20 years, that people, oh yeah, there you go, the human cost of electricity.
Yeah. There is one aspect that's a bit hard to take account of, isn't there? Because not only do you know, like the deep water accident in the Gulf of Mexico in, what was that, 2011? You know, the effects of that are largely gone, and in 20 years will be completely gone. And Fukushima is going to be a problem for 1,000 years or more. I don't know, but hundreds of years, I would suspect. You know, I don't know. I hear what you're saying. That it is clearly, by any objective measure, it is far safer than coal or oil and gas. But it does play. It plays quite well for the anti-lobby when the accidents are so sort of profound in a way.
Yeah, and you can't dispute that. It's there, wherever you build a factory, there is going to be an inherent risk. You hope that as things get better, like Chernobyl happened because one of the operators shut down every single one of the safety features, and so when a meltdown started to happen, nothing was there to kick in. Fukushima happened because it was built on a fault line, and a tsunami went into, you know, and it shut down all the backup diesel generators. You'd hope that with, you know, building new generators with like digital safety backups and somewhere seismically, you know, where natural disasters don't happen, like the Canadian Shield, then maybe accidents are less likely to happen. But you're right, there's always going to be a risk of it.
Yeah, and so another, just as a footnote to sort of energy sources, I agree with you. I think we need these big industrial scale energy generation schemes like nuclear to sustain the kind of lifestyles we seem to want, especially in the West. I do also think that we don't pay enough attention to the, you know, I think the idea of kind of this distributed, local, small scale generation, even home scale generation, I think is really awesome and kind of in principle, I just think that's clearly a way to give yourself resilience and a sort of strategic agility, if you like, that I think is really cool. So, you know, I live in a small community, 1,000 people. We have our own power company. I would totally advocate them exploring all sorts of avenues for energy generation. And here in Nova Scotia, there's very little research really relatively goes into tidal energy, wave energy, things that seem like, yeah, why wouldn't you be experimenting with those things in a first world country with lots of scientists? But another thing I just heard on the radio a couple of days ago about the UK, they just announced some new energy policy around distributed energy. And I thought they mentioned something that I thought was quite interesting and doesn't get a lot of, perhaps not that much attention is paid to it, is the demand side, and how one of the problems with meeting energy demand is that it's quite spiky and you need to be able to cope with surges. That's one of the reasons why you kind of need high base level and of generation. So they were talking about things like more, you know, one of the offshoots of connected smart homes and things, once you've got things like freezers and fridges and stuff plugged into the internet, which seems ridiculous, but you can start to potentially influence how they consume power, which I'd never really thought much about before. Is there a lot in Canada going on that side, do you think, in the wake of, I'm just asking that question in the wake of what they announced in the UK the other day, which I'm not sure I could articulate?
I think, I don't think so. Like, you don't hear too much of, certainly there's not a lot of individual efforts. In Alberta, our carbon tax is non-revenue neutral. So the government uses the money to bring a bunch of, it allows individuals to purchase or to have government employees come in and install like LED lights and smart thermostats. And I think that smart thermostats are sort of a way to be more energy efficient within the home. So I think on an individual basis, not a lot of people do it, but I think that things like the carbon tax and government initiatives can help sort of push people in the right direction to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And like these little policies, or they seem little, but they actually do contribute to how we behave, you know.
I mean, I also want to mention, since we're talking about distributed systems, that the goal, one of the goals, yes, Matt, is to have a independent architectural, parallel architecture where energy is sufficient in these communities. But another big goal that we talked about earlier is to also reduce global suffering in some way, right? Make the human existence better. And if, you know, maybe one measure of that is by reducing total carbon footprint. So I urge folks to not just think about, but go and look at data on how much energy it costs to produce a solar panel, and how much oil is burned during, you know, per solar panel, right? So it's nice to reduce your electricity bill, but you're increasing. Yeah, I mean, maybe you are, maybe you aren't increasing the global electricity bill by using a net negative technology.
Yeah, I did like a carbon footprint thing once, and I was so appalled at the consequences of flying somewhere that I pretty much had to stop thinking about it. Because, you know, because I mean, I fly probably more than the average person, well, definitely more than the average person, and it's shocking.
Yeah, you almost had
how much fuel that burns.
You almost had to move to a real town, huh?
No, but I mean, it is kind of, I mean, on some level, it is crazy to be talking about LED light bulbs when you go sit on I-10 in Houston. I
Right.
mean, it's the number of people accelerating 2,000 kilograms of metal up to 75 miles an hour on a good day, not at rush hour, in order to get themselves to go and buy a pint of beer. Do you know what I mean? Like, never mind going to work or taking someone to hospital or the kids to school or something, quote unquote, useful / noble. I mean, it's almost seems hopeless to me. It's like,
Right.
wow, we are so privileged and wasteful.
I want to shift
one of
gears a bit here.
one of the videos we're coming up with in the next couple months is a look at people's individual missions and where they can actually make a difference in their lives by things that they can cut out. And so just looking at it on like a percentage basis on like food and travel and air travel and stuff like that. So because yeah, you're right. It's one of the things that people don't really pay attention to. And it is crazy that people will push LED light bulbs and then fly to Asia and think that they're doing good for the world. You know, and on the other hand, people have a right to travel. And so it's sort of like a value judgment for themselves on like, to them. Yeah. Yeah,
no, I agree. Yeah, it's again, I mean, this just reflects the nuanced nature of this whole debate, right? I mean, it is difficult, and we face difficult decisions if we're gonna make progress and increase the overall level of human happiness, like Graham said. And I what I love about what ENERGYminute's doing is the education and data have to underlie that sensible debate,
right?
Because if they're not there, it does. Well, it's not. This isn't even a prediction. I mean, we know that it degenerates very quickly into nonsense and fake news and whatever. Just unfounded.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit here, and I want to ask you, Aaron, how do you make your media? How do you create your content, the videos and the infographics and stuff?
So we sit down and we decide on a topic that we want to cover, and then one of us will go off and talk to people, research it fairly extensively, and we always, Alex is especially really good at making sure that everything is sourced correctly, so that we can put out content that we're comfortable with.
Right.
And then we have a really great animator from Lithuania, and so we give him just like a script, and he comes up with these really brilliant graphics. He has his own style that has really sort of defined the ENERGYminute style, and then it's sort of a couple back and forth between us and him, and then we provide him a voiceover, and then the video shows up about a month later.
Cool, nice. Well, it looks really good. Look forward to seeing some more videos and some more graphics. So we've got a question that we ask every guest, which is, what are you reading at the moment?
What am I reading? Are you guys both geologists by chance?
Ish.
Recovering.
Ish? Recovering. So I'm reading a book right now called The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert.
This sounds cheerful. And, yeah.
Talk about prediction.
It's so. Oh. The geologists have officially proclaimed that we're in a new period called the Anthropocene, where if alien geologists 1 million years from now come down and study at this point, they'll be able to see a distinct difference in the geologic record, which is changes that we've made.
Right.
And so part of it is like a of a lot of species. Part of it is redistribution of fauna and flora, and it's geologic undertone. So especially, it's really interesting, but you don't need for it to be
cool. It sounds good. Tell us the author's name again.
It's Elizabeth Kolbert. Yeah, and it won a Pulitzer Prize last year, so it's, I'm not the only one who likes it.
What about you, Matt?
I left the fascinating little statistics book that I mentioned, I think probably on the last show, at home. I was halfway through it, so I've picked that up again. I should like tweet a picture of my current bedside table because it's got probably 20 books on it. So they're getting out of control. I need to make some tough decisions because I just actually bought a couple new books. On holiday, I read what's he called? William Gibson's Neuromancer, which I've not read before. It is a very well-known best-selling book from the 80s, I believe, sort of a techno-punk, one of the original techno-punk novels about, well, a dystopian future, let's just say. Kind of in the same vein as oh God, what's it called? You know, what's that Harrison Ford movie that they're
Blade Runner.
The Blade Runner that they're making out. So I think I must have seen the Blade Runner trailer or something for the new one and picked that off my bookshelf because I think I've had it for ages. Anyway, it's pretty awesome, but it's also kind of wild. Like I feel like it would have gone down better in my teenage years. So it didn't make me feel old or anything. Yeah. What about you, Graham? What are you reading? You're always reading something interesting.
I just finished a book called Straight to Hell by John Lefebvre. It's a sort of like an behind-the-scenes look at the investment banking business. So it's pretty light on investment banking content, but it's like a hilarious look at this guy's life and the lives of investment bankers while they're working. It's fun. I mean, it's very funny if you're into like derogatory dark humor, but it's not one for the kiddies.
Yeah, right.
I'll say. But anyway, so the book was good. It was entertaining. I don't know. Just, again, light on content. So whatever. If you're looking for a quick read, that's it. But I just started a book that I think Matt will be interested in, and it's called Stuff Matters by Mark Miodonik. Is how I'm gonna tackle that name.
Yeah.
He's a materials scientist. I think he's a materials physicist, and he explains in the style of prose his experience with the structure and beauty of materials. So I have high hopes for this book. So I'll report back next week and let you know how it goes.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Interesting.
Yeah. Right on. Cool. Aaron, thank you for joining us. It was a great talk.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Aaron. It was very enlightening. I'm glad you're doing the work you're doing. So thanks to you and Alex for your advocacy and helping keep that conversation about energy policy and our energy future civil and informed.
Indeed. See you guys next week on Undersampled Radio.
Bye-bye.